All right, let's jump straight into this explainer. I want you to picture Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Gautam Adani, and Richard Branson. You know them, right? They're basically the poster children for massive billionaire level success. But what actually unites them? Well, according to the really fascinating source material we're unpacking today, it's not just their massive bank accounts. It's the fact that they completely sidestepped a deeply ingrained trap. A trap that the average everyday student proudly and usually unknowingly walks right into. So the source breaks it down like this to show the core divide. On one side, you've got the 0.4%. These are the billionaires, the disruptors, the innovators who just stepped completely outside the traditional system. And on the exact opposite side, the 99.6%. That's the vast majority of us who are told from day one to maintain 90% attendance, memorize those textbooks, and just follow every single rule without questioning it. The argument here is that while that 0.4% escaped, the rest of us are caught up in this perfectly designed system of rules that literally caps our potential. And it honestly builds into a pretty heartbreaking reality when you map it out. I mean, think about it. You play by the rules for decades. The source actually highlights real stories of folks who spent 15 years studying, rocked up 3 postgraduate degrees, and what did they get? Endless job rejections and people mocking them. And when you finally do land that job, it's often for a really meager starting salary. Next thing you know, you're taking out a home loan, maybe a car loan, and suddenly you are completely trapped in this cycle of EMIs. You're just paying off monthly loans, living with this paralyzing, constant fear of layoffs just because you need to keep up with your debt. You've essentially traded your big dreams for a basic paycheck. Now here is a complete mind-bender of a quote. We all blindly follow this educational path, right? We think it's a golden ladder to success, but the source posits a totally different, kind of shocking theory. What if this system wasn't actually built to help you succeed at independence at all? What if it was meticulously designed to give you a foundation to fail at free thinking, and instead just mold you into a highly compliant, obedient worker? To understand how that's even possible, we really have to look backwards. Section 1, Origins of Obedience. Let's take a quick trip down a historical rabbit hole here. We're looking at the incredibly rapid, global evolution of the obedient worker model. It all kicks off with the Industrial Revolution around the 1760s, takes a super sharp pivot with a major military defeat for Prussia in 1806, and eventually sweeps across the globe, landing right in India with the Macaulay Act in 1835. Let's actually zoom in on that middle date for a second, 1806. Okay, so the crucial turning point here is literally a military failure. In 1806, Prussia had one of the most formidable armies on the planet, but they still lost to Napoleon. Why? Well, the Prussian leaders analyzed the defeat and realized something crazy. Their soldiers were using their own brains. They were thinking independently on the battlefield instead of just blindly following their commander's orders. The leadership realized that if they wanted to win future wars, they needed a radical, ground-up shift in how human minds were trained. And bam, that realization directly birthed the Prussian education system. It was an 8-year compulsory schooling model heavily mandated for kids between the ages of 5 and 13. And according to the source, its sole historical purpose was literally to eradicate a student's free will. It was engineered to train young, impressionable minds to follow instructions and respect authority without asking a single question. Basically producing mindlessly obedient soldiers for the state. Now, here's where it gets wild. Watch how this military brainwashing merged with economics. During the Industrial Revolution, the world was shifting from independent farmers and crafters to these massive machine-driven factories. But the factory owners had a massive problem. Nobody actually wanted to give up their independent farming life to go slave away as a factory laborer. So, what did the industrialists do? They just adopted the Prussian education model. The source argues that the entire goal was to condition children early, stifle their natural creativity, so that by the time they graduated, they genuinely believed factory labor was their only valid option to earn a living. Moving on to Section 2, the Colonial Master Plan. Check out this smoking gun of a quote straight from Lord Thomas Babington Macaulay back in 1835. The British were dealing with a massive logistical nightmare. How does a tiny number of British officials control a colossal Indian population? English education definitely wasn't introduced as some generous gift of enlightenment. As Macaulay explicitly states right here, it was a highly calculated move to manufacture a specific class of people who were Indian in appearance, but completely British in their mindset, their taste, and their loyalty. So, what was the real endgame here? Simple. It was to create subservient workers. The ultimate objective was to brainwash the local population into believing that serving as clerks in British offices or fighting as sepoys in the British Army, and most importantly, strictly following British rules, was their highest possible duty in life. It was literally an education system designed to make a population proudly enforce its own colonization. All right, let's fast forward to today. Section 3, the modern reality check. Prepare yourself because this statistic from the International Labor Organization is absolutely brutal. 65%. That represents the staggering percentage of jobless youth in India right now. We are talking about a massive portion of an entire generation that did everything right, followed all the system's rules, and yet found absolutely zero reward at the finish line. And if that wasn't bad enough, get a load of this second devastating number, 42%. That is the percentage of Indian graduates under the age of 25 who are completely unemployed. Just think about that for a second. Think about the millions of rupees, the decades of life spent strictly following this educational blueprint, only for nearly half of these young, energetic graduates to find themselves totally locked out of the workforce. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Okay, but if I just crush the exams and get into a top-tier school, I'm golden, right? Well, data from the elite institutions completely shatters the illusion of that safe path. The source points to some really worrying news coming directly out of the elite Indian Institutes of Technology. 36 students unplaced in Bombay, 40 unplaced in Delhi in 2023, 31 unplaced in Kanpur. Cracking literally the toughest exams in the entire country simply doesn't guarantee you a secure future anymore. The whole system is fundamentally bottlenecked. And hey, even if you do manage to land the job, let's talk about the payoff. The source compares the average monthly salary of a highly educated Indian engineer to a truck driver in the United States, who, by the way, can pull in the equivalent of 10 to 12 lakhs INR a month during good times. Now, this isn't just about comparing two different countries. It highlights how financially broken the traditional promised educational path has become when you measure the intense, grueling input of studying against the actual financial output you get at the end. Which brings us to the most important part, Section 4, escaping the system. Look, the days of just banking on a piece of paper are pretty much over. We really need to contrast the old, broken way, spending 5 years and lakhs of rupees on purely theoretical college degrees, with the modern alternative. Because today, you can acquire highly actionable, super affordable skills online. And honestly, the best part? You're learning them directly from real achievers, people who've actually built successful things in the real world, rather than folks whose knowledge is strictly confined to textbook theory. So how do we actually break free from all this? If you're a parent or a student listening to this, the source material has a clear message. Stop feeding the conveyor belt. We have to stop prioritizing mark sheets over actual practical knowledge. We need to expose kids to a massive world of interests far beyond just math, physics, and chemistry. And here's a really interesting point. While thousands of students take a drop year just to miserably grind for exams like JEE or NEET, the source actually suggests taking a drop year to figure out what your true passion is. Explore different opportunities. Value self-dependence over mere obedience. So that leaves us with one massive question to wrap up this explainer. We know the origins of our education system were literally designed to make us obedient workers. And all the modern data shows that path is actively crumbling. So what's it going to be? Will you blindly accept the trap of an average, fear-driven life? Or will you take the risk, acquire real-world skills, and build your own path? The choice is entirely up to you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this sparks some serious thought about your own journey. Catch you next time.